Allen Company and Big Al will be at the I-80 Truckers Jamboree. See you there.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
FMCSA says it will renew an hours of service exemption for oversized and overweight loads, and the truck parking crisis factors in. Landline Magazine's Mark Schremer joins the show with details. CBD is a hemp extract, supposedly without the THC's intoxicating effects. But that doesn't mean that it's safe for a trucker to use. I'll talk with Dr. Tony Hudson of Interstate Health Clinics. Court case delays, appearing in court and case dismissals, all three are things you need to know about if you are going to court. Jeff McConnell and James Manella of Road Law offer some information. And finally, the spot market is moving along according to seasonal expectations. Brent Hutto of Truckstop breaks down the numbers and lets us know what lanes and freight bring in the best numbers. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration announcing that it's planning to renew an exemption from hours of service regulations for truckers transporting oversized and overweight loads. Joining us with the details is Mark Schremer, who's covering the story for Landline Magazine. Mark, welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm always glad to be here.
You're taking up residency here, I think, in Studio A, which we appreciate. This is a provisional renewal for the Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association. We're going to talk about the reasoning here, I think, as well, but what do we need to know about the exemption itself?
Yeah, so basically what it is, it's an exemption from the mandatory 30-minute rest break rule. And the argument basically comes, and this also just to give some kind of background here, this organization, the Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association, originally requested this exemption all the way back in 2015. It was granted for 5 years. Then in 2020 was granted for another 5, and now they're going to give a provisional renewal for 6 months as they wait for comments to come in. But basically, the issue with this is, as you know, with these oversized loads, there's they have to be granted permit, either state or local, and a lot of times the hours are even restricted of when they can run these oversized loads. So they argue that with the lack of truck parking nationwide, that to be able to fulfill this 30-minute rest break requirement, a lot of times what would have to happen is for them to have to pull onto the shoulder of a highway, which that is dangerous for any truck to be doing that, as we are well aware. Yep. And we've talked about some of the issues and the catastrophes that have occurred for those reasons, but especially with an oversized load where in some instances the load could actually carry over into the lanes of traffic, creating issues. So basically the argument is that is more dangerous than skipping the 30-minute rest break.
Right.
And then instead they have different rules in place to make sure that their drivers aren't fatigued, and that's the way to handle this. And one of the things I think is interesting from FMCSA's standpoint is, they're basically saying in this exemption that, unless they are presented some new evidence that this isn't meeting safety standards or there's dangerous for some unforeseen reason that they're not aware of yet, this is probably going to be granted for another 5 years. But the truck parking issue is a big part of this.
Well, yeah, and that's the rub here, right? Because if FMCSA is granting this exemption to, these folks, the bigger question is, why not make that the exception for everybody?
Yeah.
Right? If you're talking about safety.
No, it's an excellent point, because now I do understand the distinction with these oversized loads, that it's even more dangerous for them to be parking on the shoulder. But the point remains the same. What happens is, because of the lack of truck parking nationwide, and you are seeing truck drivers that are put between a rock and a hard place often with that they're running out of hours. There's no place to park. They're not going to be able to get to the next truck stop in time, before their hours run out. So they end up parking on the side of the shoulder. And like I said, we just had the recent with the NTSB report of a fatal crash that occurred in one of these situations. And it's not the first time. And, it happens. It's just a horrible a tragedy that you have the truck driver put into that situation, and also we have distracted driving is a huge problem nationwide.
Problem. Yeah.
And all it takes is looking at that phone for a couple of seconds, not seen and maybe drifting off and running right into the back of one of these trucks. So I think you make an excellent point, and this is something that I wonder if we'll see maybe an exemption request that goes beyond just these oversized loads.
Yeah, I didn't take debate club in high school, but I would imagine if you were in a debate and someone raised this, this particular issue, and you were to say, all right, well then why not do it for everybody? If you're worried about safety and you said this is, a safety concern, that would seem like a point, counterpoint. Again, I didn't take debate
to prove
club.
how cool I was in debate club.
Oh, well, there you go. See, I'll hire you to make the case here. But I mean, people can't make the case for themselves. There's a comment period, right? That's up here as well for this. So
so starting June 20th, there'll be a 30-day comment period on it. And like I said, I think this is one, unless there's some evidence to the contrary, that they likely will renew. But this would be a good opportunity. Maybe even put in a comment about that. Hey, why not us?
Yeah, why not us? One more quick item of business here related to all the scams targeting truckers that are out there right now. And Mark, there's a new one. It looks like in Tennessee, the authorities are warning people about. We've got a problem with the post, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the scam itself, not necessarily a new one, but again, just another case of truckers being targeted.
Yeah, there were a couple different ones coming out of Tennessee, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, and one involved kind of a truck stop and basically confronting truck drivers and putting them in a betting game, 3-card money.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Just say no.
Yeah.
Just walk away. But also they're tech scams. And one of the things that I think that was important about this is that I noticed that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office on their Facebook page decided that they wanted to make sure that the public was alerted to these tech scams and knew exactly what it said. So they copied and pasted the one of the examples of the text and put it out on the Facebook post. But at least from this reporter's eye, it appears that they also included, because they copied and pasted directly, the active malicious link that if you were to click on, you would be in trouble. Obviously, I wasn't able to for sure know that because I wasn't going to click on that link and find out.
You passed the test.
But I did reach out to law enforcement to let them know. They did not respond to me on that. But I guess what the message here is, don't copy and paste those to let people know. And also, even if law enforcement is the one that doing it, still use a careful eye before clicking on any link.
Be careful out there. The scams are everywhere. Mark, you're everywhere as well. We appreciate you being here today, and we'll talk to you again soon.
No problem.
And that's Landline Now News for today. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll find out why truckers should never use CBD from Dr. Tony Hudson of Interstate Health Clinics. We'll be back in just a moment with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
High heat and low lubricity can break your diesel fuel down fast. Summer driving means crowded roads, more stress, dust, and a bigger risk of costly engine damage. Howe's Diesel Defender protects from the inside out, cleaning, lubricating, and fighting injector wear. Visit Howe'sProducts.com.
With rising costs affecting everyone, switching to a genuine Vibrotech TVD viscous damper can help you avoid expensive repairs and downtime. Save money and keep your truck running smooth with Vibrotech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Landline Now, welcome back. CBD, or cannabidiol, is an extract from the hemp plant, supposedly without the intoxicating effects of THC, the substance in marijuana that makes people high. So many people assume that as truck drivers, they're safe to use CBD while on the road. But is that really the case? I discussed the ins and outs of using CBD recently with Dr. Tony Hudson of Interstate Health Clinics. Well, first of all, there's folks that aren't familiar with this stuff, and I always like to start with the definition. What is CBD? Can you explain basically in layman's terms what that three-letter term refers to?
Sure. Well, let me give you a sort of a final statement, and then let's work back. And because you're talking with a lot of people in the commercial driving industry, obviously. So I want them to receive at least one very significant, word from me about this. If they are driving a commercial vehicle, if they have a commercial driver's license, they should not use any CBD products. Okay, now that's the final word, and we'll tell you how we get there. Okay, at least they'll have that message. And I'll give you some more clarity about that too. We come along because it could be a career ender for them. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, basically, when you're talking about a cannabis plant. Let's start. Okay, that's what the plant is, and so there's two components to that. One that you hear about a lot, which was the hemp bill. HEMP bill was passed by Congress back a few years ago. And it was done under the guise that what we were going to do is we're going to make this available for farmers, okay? Because you can use hemp in paper, textiles, oils. So there is some legitimate usage for it. The other part of the cannabis plant, of course, is marijuana. And so when you're talking about hemp, by law, is not supposed to have more than 0.3% THC, which is marijuana. That's the active chemical in marijuana that makes you high. That's right. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. It's a big old name. But then the CBC is a drug, or it's a compound called cannabidiol. Cannabidiol. That's the CBD. That's got all the. Well, what's happened is it went way beyond the farming situation, and now it's everywhere, and it's really all over. Truck stops, travel centers. I mean, local stores. I mean, I'm sure in Kansas City, just like it is in Cookeville, you can buy CBD products for everything from toenail polish to removing earwax. I mean, it's touted to cure everything, and I'm not saying it's not potentially useful. You asked me a question about, there is a product that's called Epidolex, which is the only medicine that actually is a CBD product, and that's only used in childhood seizures. So it's not something that a typical commercial driver would ever encounter. Now, there is research being done with CBD to see if there are perhaps other medical benefits. But everything that's out there now is basically word of mouth. I mean, it's promoted, and a lot of it, Mark. And again, I don't want to sound judgmental. It's not. It's just I'm giving you not just my observations, but the study of a lot of medical literature. It's a extremely profitable product. And that's why you see so many people that are promoting it and using it for everything. The CBD, pure CBD, does not have very much in the way of psychoactive response to it. In other words, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier very readily. So some people, and that's a little bit confusing when you think about the fact that there are a lot of people that say, well, it, quote, makes them feel so much better, unquote. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't get into your brain, and so what happens is people use the CBD product, but there's it's supposed to be regulated, but unfortunately, it's like a lot of things in our bureaucracy. Nobody ever looks at it. So, and again, Mark and Tony could go out and sort of set up our own little store and say, we're going to sell CBD that we get from our cannabis plants. But who's knowing whether or not we test it or not to see, well, what is the concentration? What part of the plant did we get it from? Did we get it from the flowers, which have a lot higher, THC content than other parts of the plant? So it's not regulated well at all. Every now and again, you'll read a report where somebody gets busted because they were selling CBD that had higher than a 0.3% level of THC in it. So we've tested many, many, many products, and it's used oftentimes now when a commercial driver, this is where a commercial driver can really get into trouble, because they like to use that then knowingly or unknowingly as a reason why they tested positive on their marijuana metabolite. And they'll oftentimes say, well, I've been using CBD gummies, or I've been eating some CBD brownies, or, whatever it may be. Well, that may very well be truthful, but that does not allow them then to be dismissed from having a positive marijuana metabolite. And when that happens, then they have to, if they're going to continue to drive commercially, then they have to go see a substance abuse professional and go through a program, and then basically be randomly tested for at least 2 years. And some companies, if you fail a drug test, you're terminated. And so before they could get another job with another company, then that company has to check the national database to see if that driver's ever been found to have a positive drug test, a federal drug test. So you can see the ramifications of that. But even more critical than that, if a driver is in an accident and say someone is injured or killed, well, then they would deem to be driving while impaired with a positive marijuana metabolite in their system, which would be obviously a much more critical piece in terms of what the ramifications might be. So I'm not trying to sound like an alarmist. It's just that if they're using CBD products, then they are significantly at risk if they're called up for a random drug test, or if they have a post-accident drug test. If they test positive, it doesn't really make any difference about where they're alleging that the marijuana metabolite came from. If it's there, it's there.
You mentioned earlier that this is very often not a regulated product. I've always been told, with herbal remedies and other things, that one of the problems is if it's not regulated, you really don't know what's in it. There's no one checking that. Is that the big problem there?
Exactly. It's the same thing in your vitamin and mineral industry. One of my colleagues and I were talking about that earlier. There are very few vitamins that have what's called USP certification, that's U.S. Pharmacopoeia. Now, that's not the FDA. U.S. Pharmacopoeia actually there are some brands of vitamins that allow their vitamins to be tested by the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, and that attests then to the fact that, yes, if you are taking fish oil, that actually is fish oil, or if you're taking garlic, that actually is garlic. You always have to be concerned if you're buying something like that. And again, I'm not trying to be promotional or judgmental, but if you're taking any product, you've seen sometimes you'll read on the bottle, it'll say distributed by some XYZ company in Boise, Idaho, or Schenectady, New York. Well, that doesn't tell you though where it was made or manufactured. So there's a lot of difference between where it's manufactured and where it's put into a bottle and sold out to the public. So it's the same situation that you get into with any kind of the hemp products. There's really not a good regulation. Well, and it would be impossible, frankly, at this stage to do much in terms of regulation because it's so pervasive across our culture. And so, it's very, very, very challenging. So, I've actually seen people that I knew anecdotally weren't smoking marijuana, but they've had profound side effects by using CBD products in terms of their central nervous system, unbeknownst to them that the CBD products they were used had a significant level of marijuana metabolites in them.
Another thing that I've heard about with this is drug interactions that, when I go to my pharmacy, one of the things my pharmacist and my doctor always check on is this prescription medication I'm on conflicting with this one or interacting with it in a way that could harm me. With us not really knowing what's in CBD, how much of a problem is that with CBD? How could it potentially affect someone?
Well, it can affect other drugs significantly because it alters the metabolism of a lot of medications. So some medications may be metabolized more rapidly, some may be metabolized more, slower. Also, the CBD and the THC also interact with each other. So if you're allegedly using CBD, but you've got THC in it, then the THC actually is more potent.
Wow.
So again, you can understand why some people can have some pretty bizarre reactions to what they might have been thinking was a fairly benign product. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm not totally against CBD. What I'm totally against is when it's used or promoted inappropriately, and we're not. There probably are some medicinal properties of that drug that will eventually be found. But unfortunately, we've gone way the other direction, and it all boils down to the mighty dollar. It's very inexpensive to make, huge. People are always looking, unfortunately, for sort of a quick fix. And so that's why you see it promoted in every type of ointment, shampoo, pill, potion. You rub it, put it on your dog, you name it.
Yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of things advertised with that, that this is the latest miracle drug.
Right. And nobody has any idea how to dose themselves. Understand? I mean, so, some people might take a little bit and they get some of the marijuana metabolite effect and they think, well, this is a pretty good feeling. I think I'll take even more, not recognizing that they're altering their mental status. Let me tell you something before I forget about it too. What we're seeing more and more, it's being reported. It doesn't get much activity in the lay press, but there is a phenomenon now. If you want to listen, it's called EVALI, EVALI, and that's e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. E-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. It's a profound presentation. We're seeing it more in the younger population who's doing so much, vaping, but it's a significant, serious side effect, because most, unfortunately, especially most, and I'm not talking about young people. I've got 10 grandchildren, but vaping, a lot of people vape, but they really don't even know what they're vaping. So they may be thinking they're vaping CBD products, for instance, but there's a lot of other constituents of that, which they're going directly into their lungs. So we're seeing this now more and more showing up in emergency rooms.
That was Dr. Tony Hudson of Interstate Health Clinics, which operates clinics at a number of truck stops nationwide, talking about the potential hazards of using CBD for truck drivers. You can learn more about the clinics and the services they offer at interstatehealth.com. Again, that website is interstatehealth.com. And if you have questions about drug use rules in trucking, you can call CMCI at 816-229-5791. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truckstop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truckstop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Landline Now, welcome back. Got legal troubles? Landline Now's news staff talks regularly with a couple of guys who might be able to help. Jeff McConnell and James Manella, the attorneys with Road Law.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Jeff McConnell and James Manella of Road Law. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Ashley.
Good to be here, Ashley.
Now, Road Law has a lot of cases where the court process has or is taking much longer to resolve than usual. You've mentioned that clients in these matters get frustrated, of course. What do you tell them when this kind of situation happens?
Yeah, that is unfortunately just part of the court process, Ashley. I know a lot of people think that when they call and we take the case and we notify the court we're representing them, that it's just going to be done, in a matter of a few days. And I know a lot of callers, you can call us anytime at Road Law to check on the status of your case, but a lot of times we're going to say, hey, it's still on calendar, or that the court continued that. We have a new date. Well, why did they give you a new date? Why didn't you get it dismissed? Because they're dragging their feet. Well, in particular, I'll be honest, even after COVID, the courts got way behind when we got back into shape after COVID. And, this failure to prosecute standard that everybody talks about, well, it's taking too much time. You need to dismiss my case because you didn't give me a speedy trial. Well, that phrase has really gotten stretched under the law as to what a judge. If you stand there before a judge at the podium, Ashley, and you say, Judge, I'd like you to dismiss my client's case, dismiss Ashley's case because it's taken so long to get in front of you, and the judge is like, really? I might continue this again. Go back in line. They're just not in the habit or the mindset of dismissing this stuff. After 3 months, no. 9 months, no. Maybe a couple of years, maybe. You'd still have to do a complete and formal motion to maybe get that accomplished. But it's still not going to be accomplished if the court has continued this stuff. There's turnover just like any other business. There's a lot of turnover in the DA's office. And new people get the file, and the judge is very lenient about allowing them additional time to take a look at it. Hey, we do now. I don't want you to think we just roll over on these types of time passages. We do jump up and down, and we do ask the court to dismiss this stuff. But asking and getting it approved, Ashley, is a totally different story. James, you add anything to that?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is that a lot of times people hear things and believe things, and when we're talking about a right to a speedy trial, what we're originally talking about is a criminal defendant, somebody who has a criminal charge, and somebody who's stuck in jail somewhere and doesn't have bond or hasn't made bond, and they need a right to a speedy trial to either be found guilty or innocent and get through the process. The difference is that a vast majority of these traffic tickets are not criminal charges. They might be civil penalties. They might just be traffic infractions. They don't rise to the level of a crime. So when you keep saying, or somebody says, I need a speedy trial, I have a right to a speedy trial, et cetera, well, you're stuck in more of a infraction bureaucracy some days, and the constitutional rights under the Sixth Amendment aren't applying to your traffic infraction. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're worried about, how long or how quick is my hearing going to be. Like, let's use Ohio for an example. Ohio has a right to a speedy trial statute. So if you don't waive your right or waive your time or waive your right to a speedy trial, you're going to have a trial very quickly. Well, is that always to your advantage in a traffic ticket situation? Probably not. The vast majority of cases that we work, we waive time. We don't want a trial in 7 days. We want to have time to do discovery. We want the case to get a little bit older. Sometimes, we continue matters just out of strategy to get more time. And so, you don't always want a fast and speedy decision.
And I'd also say, and James touched on this, I would say that time is a traffic defendant's friend. It is not an enemy. I know it's it's frustrating not to have your case resolved, and it's angst-ridden, and you have a lot of anxiety driving around day after day saying, what's the status of my case? But don't sweat that. If you have road law looking over your shoulder and have you on calendar, we're doing it. We're doing those types of calendar watching. You don't have to. And so I know there's a lot of anxiety with that time, but time really is a defendant's friend. These matters, these infraction matters, they get a lot less shiny in about 3 to 8 months than they were when they first hit the court's calendar, and they have bigger fish to fry in most cases criminally to deal with. And here we are, we can certainly set most of these matters for a trial, and they've got to mess with us just like it's any other traffic trial or trial case. So a lot of times with that in the background, that there's a trial pending, and it's been some time, I think we're in a lot better position strategically to start asking for amended charges or dismissals for the actual and original charge.
Now, when it comes to criminal cases, of course, a lot of our listeners are truck drivers. They're out on the road. Talk to me about, when they have to physically appear. And this sometimes isn't just for the initial arraignment, but they might have to go back. Talk to me about that.
Well, that's exactly right, Ashley. And part of what the differentiation is that when you're dealing with a criminal charge, well, it's just called a crime. There might be a minor misdemeanor. It might be a felony case.
Yep.
We have a lot more, it's not necessarily more stringent, but you have more statutory obligations. So, for example, it may require that a defendant appear in court in order to have their, the charges read against them. Like sometimes you hear people say, we waive the reading. We don't, we know what we're charged with. We don't need to read the whole criminals, all the crimes and the statutes and all this stuff. So you waive the reading, but there's more steps involved in terms of the criminal procedure of it. Advising the defendant of what they're charged with, what the rights are. The judges in criminal cases tend to want to have a defendant in court, usually at every proceeding, just because if we're dealing with a crime where, for example, the penalty is much more severe. It's not about money all the time. It's about incarceration. Losing your civil rights, your civil liberties. You may be going to jail, and so one, they don't want to have somebody absent from the court in those types of cases, and so it might be that if we have a strict judge, it may be every single court appearance, and that becomes time-consuming, and it is not always easy for somebody to come back. But if you're out on bail rather than sitting in jail, it's probably less of a hardship. So I don't know, Jeff, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we have. In fact, we've got a pending case. This topic is really prompted by a current case that we're dealing with, where the court has continued the matter. Now, this is where the judge says, hey, I know all the parties are here, the defendant's here, it's a criminal misdemeanor case, but the state still hasn't been able to get a hold of the, what's it called, James, a flak jacket, an officer wears a jacket and they have the camera.
Yeah, body cam
footage.
The
body cam video, they don't have that. We haven't received that yet. And we're jumping up and down and saying, well, that was June, Your Honor, as in last year in 2024. And how long are we planning on giving the state leeway to provide that information, that cam video? And to date, these requests for us to dismiss this charge has fallen on deaf ears. They're saying, hey, listen, we've got major turnover here. We're way behind. We're doing the best we can in getting this video footage up so that everyone can look at it. I mean, in these cases, the state has to provide that information that they have. They say they have it. Well, let's see it. Well, we don't have it. Well, you just said you had it. Well, we don't have it ready. Oh, you don't have it ready. Well, why don't you just dismiss this because you're wasting everybody's time? This is 4 appearances that we've had a driver come back for. 4. And they are as frustrated as we are, but we cannot not have them there. And it ain't our call. It's the judge sitting on the bench, the person in the black robe. It's their call that we have this individual there each and every court appearance on these hearings. I wish there was more we can do. And I'll tell tell you at the end of a case, if you worked out a plea in a criminal matter, Ashley, there's like a 3 or 4 page disposition sheet. And the judge wants to go over that with the client standing next to your side at the podium. You guys, drivers have to come back to do that. And I know it's frustrating. Time is money. You hire an attorney so you don't have to come to court. Well, 95% of the time, that's true. We can do that for you. But those rare occasions in these courts that are really anal about having that driver come back, man, we've got to have you there. And if it's not a convenient date, I will say this: the states have these the states have these continuances. It's generally pretty easy with a written request to a court. Hey, my client can't make it on that date. Push it another 30 days. We've not had those denied many times at all. So just bear with us. We'll all get through it.
So how would road law have a case where the court has continued the matter multiple times? How could you have that dismissed?
I will say, and James will follow me up on this, I know, but I've been through this scenario, and that is where you're standing in front of the court, and your client's there for the third time. They may have come in from out of state, and the state announces that they're simply not ready. Now, this is the third time that they've told the judge they're not ready, the DA's office. And instead of doing the right thing, which is coming up to me as attorney of record before and saying, hey, we're not ready, or even a week before saying we're not going to be ready, or the office. I think in the case that I'm thinking of, the officer either retired, he was transferred to another county. He's not going to be in court. They knew this well in advance. I didn't have to have the inconvenience of having a client come in from out of state to physically be there in this court, to know that right at that second that could have been done. And I think the judge knew that could have been done. So if you're an assistant district attorney cutting your teeth on the traffic calendar, and you don't even look at this Tupperware bin full of case files before you come into court, and do a colleague, maybe the just thing, and giving us a call and saying, hey, this isn't going to court, filing something to dismiss the charge, something like that. And, the judge looks at me and I look at the judge. In those cases, you don't really have to do much, Ashley. To be honest, it's not my, Perry Mason lawyer skills. The judge is like, we're not doing this anymore. You should have, this man has spent time and effort being here. So I am going to dismiss this case without fines or costs, with prejudice, so it cannot be filed again. And that notice of dismissal is going to be ready real quick. Give us about a day, counsel. Great. Thanks, Judge. So that's kind of how that works. But I'm telling you, those times are few and far between when a judge doesn't give the state leeway for a continuance. Now, again, they're not just going to keep doing it, 15 times. So that's kind of how you get those dismissed, Ashley.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Our pleasure.
That was Jeff McConnell and James Manella of Road Law. You can check them out at roadlaw.net, or if you want to talk with them directly, their number is 888-276-8000. We've got to take a short break, but we'll be right back. I'm Ashley Blackford, and you're listening to Landline Now.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. If you're hauling freight and running your own business, you need to keep track of some basic facts and figures that can determine whether you succeed or fail. And that includes finding the freight and how much money you can make hauling it. Today, Landline Now's Ashley Blackford will bring us some of that information and get some insight as to why things are happening with the folks from Truckstop.com. Here's Ashley now with a report.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Brent Hutto with Truckstop. How are you doing today, Brent?
Well, Ashley, I'm doing fantastic. Freight never stops moving, Ashley, so neither does Truckstop and Brent Hutto, because I'm on vacation at the beach, but I am here to make sure that the truckers get their information about the data in the market. That's why my theme song today is Someday by Sugar Ray. So really lighthearted song. I really appreciate it a lot because we're in week 23 and there are better days. And so I love the line in the song that says, just close your eyes and I'll take you there, because they are just around the corner. Because I'll talk about this a little bit more in at the end, but with outbound tender rejection rates just kind of continue to stay high. So that's really exciting.
All right. Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
Let's talk about current market conditions. What are things looking like?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Well, we're kind of still flying high on the market demand index, the amount of freight available compared to the number of trucks that say they're empty and ready to haul. And it's still in the mid 80s, which was 84.13, which, the normal is about 55, and so we're still favoring truckers. It also shows you that we're still a positive marketplace that's growing, and that's why you still see owner-operators signing up and getting their authority and wanting to run there and chase their own dreams, which is exciting. Load posting volumes went down about 1.5% week to week, but it's still 10%, almost 10.5% above the 5-year normal, and that's really important for owner-operators because when there's more freight, rates go up sequentially. And what I mean by sequentially is they're going to go up slowly over time. You kind of want them to. I wish they were generous but remember, any posted rate is a posted rate. It's not the actual closed rate. So to kind of give you an idea for rates, and this is with fuel, of course, it decreased 2 cents week over week from week 22 to 23, from 245 to 243. But it's still a generous side. Anything, in my opinion, above 220 is above the pandemic marketplace. And so what I mean by the pre-pandemic marketplace, so that's really a good thing because we were about 220 before it, and so we're at 243. Inflation is still a little high, and that's got some things to do in it, but the economy in America keeps doing well. Van decreased a little bit to $1.93. I wish van would get up around $2, $2.10. Flatbed was $2.53, and refrigerator was $2.34. Posted rates, remember, negotiate them. Fuel stayed at the same, 41 cents per gallon, the fuel surcharge. You got to negotiate that into your spot market contract. It's not always in there, but you can if you're an owner-operator and you're a small fleet guy, negotiate that even with a broker. So please use that. And the outbound tender reject index, which I talked about a little bit, it decreased week to week from 6.5%, but it just dropped to 6%, which means if 5% is the basement, in other words, 5% is the amount we needed at or above in the spot market for owner-operators to see rates go up, then it being above 5% is a good thing. So 6% is a good thing because that's still 20% above 5%. So that's a healthy margin. So when you think about it year over year, the outbound tender reject index last year at this time was 4.88, so it was right at about 5. Well, it's at 6 now, so that's a really good thing. So it's about 18 and almost 19% above year over year. That's super awesome. But here's the cool thing. The cool thing, Ashley, is it's been above 5% for 36 straight weeks. That shows strength coming back into the market.
What are some of the top regions and lanes from last week?
Absolutely, yeah. So you look at some of these things, and so load availability. I'm going to look at load availability in some of the regions by different type of segment. So load availability, even though it went down a little bit, it's still pretty positive in a lot of areas. Like year over year, everything is there's a few bounces up and down in some areas, but nationally it's up 4.3%, which is really good. Just because last time I checked, truckers can haul freight anywhere. But that's the beauty of living in a free country. And I love saying that. I love the fact we live in a free country. We're closing in on July 4th, a few weeks now. All right, so rates, even though they dropped a couple pennies week over week, still, there's still health in the market because year over year they've been bouncing back and forth. So it's 1.1% up nationally. Now, look, that's for all freight. You need to look at the type of freight that you haul. So let's look at that. Van freight, we've talked about Texas a lot in the last, many months, but we got some new cities on here. Salt Lake, El Paso, of course, that's Texas. We got Portland, Oregon, and you got New Orleans. That's for van freight. So you're seeing some changes in some areas. That's why I tell every trucker, make sure you know the area you're hauling in and look for the areas of which are better rates for you. For flatbed, Las Vegas, obviously that's not Texas. You got Houston, that is Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, and then Miami, Florida. Same as van. Three of the 4 were not in Texas. So it shows you that the freight's continuing to spread out on refrigerated. You've got Memphis, Phoenix, Houston, and Houston. So you have 2 out of the 4 in refrigerated rates, and those were up 25 to, wow, there's a giant one in Memphis, but this was Memphis to Memphis, so it's probably an inter move, only 10 miles. I wouldn't pay much attention to that because unless you're a dray hauler, it's not really important to you. We do get a little bit of dray freight every once in a while on Truckstop. But, that kind of gives you an idea. Look in the areas where you see increases and kind of focus in those for a certain period of time and then move to the markets that you get better rates at.
What are some important industry points that owner-operators should be aware of?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that. Every week we always talk about some of the important things that I like to pull up things that owner-operators can think about, because, I could give you all the, regulations doing this, and I talk about that some. I talked about fraud last week, which is super important to make sure you're prepped and understanding that. But there's two things going on right now. Number one, Nippon Steel was just approved by our government to buy U.S. Steel. Now, that says U.S. Steel. That's United States Steel. That's a big company. We've had a lot of challenges in the United States about producing steel. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, a steel city, and we've had lots of challenges. Well, Nippon Steel is one of the better steel companies in the world, and so I imagine that the Trump administration approved the national security concerns from the standpoint that, hey, Nippon, you're going to do these things and these things to help our country. They don't just help Nippon Steel. And so there's lots of billions and billions of dollars that are in this. But the big thing that our current president made them commit to was building a new steel mill after 2028, which would boost the total investment that Nippon would make to about $14 billion, because Donald Trump is really good about that. It's like, look, you're going to do business with America, the most successful, buying country in the world. You're gonna have plants here, and you're gonna invest in our country because we're helping your country. So that's the only way it works. And I will say the United Steelworkers was against this, but for a lot of different reasons. And so sometimes the United Steelworkers or any union tends to struggle just in general. And I'll close with this, and I'll close with China. Look, we need China to be a strong country because America is the strongest country in the world, but China's the second most strong country in the world. We need them to be strong because the world needs it. And the United States, being the largest purchaser of goods around the world by a significant margin, we've only got like 4% of the population, but we have like 60 to 70% of all the purchasing in the world. Just shows you how free countries really prosper. And this is one reason why I love the founders of our country. They were about freedom, individual rights and freedom. But China has taken a different vision on trade. Their vision of trade, and this is from Brad Setzer, the senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, and he was a former Treasury Department official. He said China's vision of trade is exporting without importing. Well, if you listen to our current president, he'll say that's not going to hold long, because you're not going to be able to export to the United States without importing our goods as well, because money, in exporting and importing, actually, money can't just go one way, because it weakens the country where the money's being sent from. So this is kind of what's going on. But China's making a lot of changes in their country, but we'll see where that goes. A lot of it's kind of the positioning, but that kind of gives you an idea of two different kind of global ideas, because I'm telling you what, the United States sets the precedent for the global market. We always will, as long as we stay the strongest country financially and freedom reigns in our country.
All right. If anyone of our listeners want more information, where can they go for that? Well,
you can always get me at Brent Hutto at Truckstop.com anytime you want to. Or you can just go to www.truckstop.com. We're celebrating 30 years in July of being a company and serving this industry, and we love it. Just like we're not quite as old as OIDA, but we're glad that we've been able to serve it for 3 decades, and you can always go there to find us.
All right. Brent, thank you so much for your time.
Ashley, thank you so much for everything that you do personally and that OIDA and Landline does to support the industry.
That was Brent Hutto with Truckstop. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer,
I farm,
I'm a veteran,
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.